The Tampa Bay Lightning came oh so close, but the drive for the three-peat is over. Adam Denker of Locked On Lightning joins us to explain what went wrong and to put in perspective Tampa Bay Lightning's run of 2 straight Stanley Cups and a trip to the final. All that and more coming up on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. So glad you could join us, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. My pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Lightning, Adam Denker. And Adam, so close. I really thought after you guys scored first in Game 6 that you guys would at least force a Game 7, but a heck of a run for the Tampa Bay Lightning. What happened in Game 6? I mean, they had the 1-0 lead. What went wrong after that?
Well, what went wrong, Gil, was just this team just couldn't keep up the pace they were playing with. After a spectacular win in Game 5 to force 6 to go back to Tampa, you really started to see the wear and tear of these last 3 playoff runs really show itself, as well as some of the inconsistencies that I've spoken about on this show with you many a times that has plagued this Tampa team throughout the season. But I'm not going to sit here and make excuses because, listen, this Tampa had a lot of opportunities in this game early on to kind of give themselves a little bit of a pad going into that second period. And that second period was really when the Avalanche came in and turned it on to another gear. I got to tip my cap to the Colorado Avalanche because, listen, as disappointing as it is to lose in the Stanley Cup final, and listen, I am the last person to complain about losing in the final after winning 2 straight. There's no other team that I would have rather have lost to. I mean, the Colorado Avalanche, tip of the cap to them. Congratulations to Kyle and Chris from Locked On Avalanche. Hell of a team. I'm sure these 2 teams will meet up with each other in the Stanley Cup final over the next couple of years. I mean, just the amount of talent on both teams. I think what it came down to, if we're going to summarize this game and just this entire series, was that unfortunately the Lightning were not the better team. They ran into one of the juggernaut of the NHL now, and you saw it especially in this game. Once this period went halfway through to the second, after the McKinnon goal, you kind of saw the tide really start to change in this game. And listen, you saw a little bit of life in the third period, but unfortunately it was a little too late there for Tampa.
You saw a little bit of life, and yet I think the Avalanche did a great job of limiting the scoring chances for the Lightning in that third period. I mean, down by a goal, what'd they have? 3 shots on goal the whole period?
Yeah, it wasn't until after the 10-minute mark in the third period where Tampa actually got their first shot. And really, that is something that Colorado did a fantastic job this entire series, was that, they were very heavy on the forecheck, really boxed in Tampa along the boards and in the corners. And that's what really impressed me from this Colorado team was they're such a fast team. They're known for their offense, but you see the work that they put in along the boards. I mean, Gil, you saw it from my team the last 2 years in the Eastern Conference Finals, so firsthand. Really, the work along the boards and getting into the dirty spots is really what's going to win you games in the end. And Colorado did a fantastic job of that in this one. And, Tampa wasn't able to keep up with that, and they couldn't really get anything going. And
it just seems like the Lightning were doing everything they could toward the end of that game to try to get the tying goal, but they just couldn't quite put it together.
Yeah, it goes back to what I said before, Gil. Really, I mean, they dug a little bit of a hole for themselves. Granted, they were only down by 1 goal, but I mean, in this kind of game, the way they've been playing throughout this entire series, and you have fatigue on thrown into that equation as well. It's just the kind of team the Avalanche are. That really is a deeper hole than one might think, given the difference. But you know what? Unfortunately, the way it turned out, I mean, they played a great game, all things considered, and if they were going to lose in the Stanley Cup final in any way, some people might think I'm crazy. I'm glad in some kind of way that they did it at home, especially with everything that this team's gone through. At least, they're not walking off the ice completely with their heads down. They're able to do it and kind of somewhat look at the crowd and celebrate their accomplishments from this season.
Try to put in perspective the legacy of this team. I mean, in the salary cap era, winning 2 straight Stanley Cups, going to 3 straight Stanley Cup final is a heck of an accomplishment. Yeah. Put it in perspective a little bit for us.
I mean, it hasn't been done in terms of 3 straight Stanley Cup final appearances since the Oilers back in the 80s, and 3 straight Stanley Cup wins since your Islanders back in the 80s. So we all know how hard it is to do that, and to do it 2 years in a row, especially with COVID and the shortened season last year, and then everything, obviously, like you said, with the salary cap, and just superstar after superstar going down here and there. The legacy, I think it really, at least for the 2000s, I think definitely puts them up at the top of the list. When you think of the 2000s in terms of dynasties, you think of the Penguins, you think of the early 2000s Devils, the Kings, the Blackhawks, those teams. But I think that everything that this team has gone through, and even this year, and you got to give it all up to not even Julien Brisebois, their general manager, but a lot of credit has to go towards Steve Yzerman, his time here. He really, except for a few players that Brisebois brought in here and there, he built this team, and this is a lot of late round draft picks, and really, that gives a little bit of I guess hope to Red Wings fans up there in Detroit of what he's trying to build. But in terms of legacy, this is, it's not over yet. That's the thing, is that, you still have the same group of guys. There's probably going to be a couple of different names on the back of the jerseys next season when we start. But I think, still it's a little bit too early, I think, in the story to really sit down and really take a look back at where the legacy is, because, the book is still being written on this team.
What is the biggest thing that this team has to accomplish in the coming off season?
They have to figure out a deal with Ondrej Palat. I think that's mandatory. That and Nick Paul, those 2 guys during this whole postseason have really been the guys that got things going, the guys that did a little bit of everything. Palat didn't exactly have a fantastic season, but he's been here for 8 years. He's one of the big leaders on this team. Him and Stamkos on that first line are an incredible duo, and it would be tough, and I think really a big blow to this team if they were to lose a guy like that. So I think working out a deal that is mutually beneficial to both parties, I think with Ondrej Palat is definitely a top priority on the Lightning's offseason list. And then, like I said, Nick Paul has been phenomenal since the Lightning got him in a midseason trade at the deadline from Ottawa, really making a big difference from day one. And I think what the Lightning need to do is maybe address their defensive core. They have Jan Rutta, who's going to be a UFA in the offseason. There's some people that think that they want him to come back. I think that maybe it might be time to look in a different direction. Has only averaged 40 games over the last 3 years. So, really they're as good and as talented this team is. I think, there's always room for improvement, and we're going to have to see what moves may or may not be made at the draft. The Lightning do have a first-round draft pick this year for the first time in the last couple of years. So they might, I wouldn't be surprised if they trade that away for another name, another notable name out in the market somewhere to maybe bolster their bottom lines or their defensive line. So we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of cards on the table for this Tampa team, even though they're so hard pressed up against the cap. I wouldn't be surprised if, we find them even better next season. So, a lot of moves that need to be made, and a lot of numbers that need to be crunched. That's definitely for sure.
Adam, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
The podcast is available on YouTube, so go ahead and subscribe, hit that notification bell. We'll definitely be talking a lot, not just only about this final, because there really is a lot to unpack, not only from the final, but also from this playoff as a whole. So go ahead and subscribe to the pod, but we'll also be talking about some of the moves, like we just mentioned, that may or may not need to be made in the offseason. So check that out. We are available in audio form. So wherever you get podcasts, we are there and we are free. And then you can follow the show at LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as Locked_Lightning on Instagram. Give me a follow at DankyDank on Twitter. That's DENKYD8NK. Love hearing from all of you, and I'm really looking forward to this offseason and looking forward. I can't wait till October 11th, Gil. It is as crazy as it sounds. We're just thinking, we have a couple of months to kind of relax and I have to admit, we always joke about this, how it's a little bit of exhausting, these playoff runs, but I'm ready to jump right back into it.
All right. Well, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Adam. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including the Stanley Cup Finals and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts.